What if one of the biggest keys to student success isn't what they're learning, but how they're thinking about their learning? Meet the new meta in learning, metacognition. Welcome to the What and Who of EDU, where we bring you insights from the top educators, researchers, and innovators who are shaping the future of teaching and learning. From emerging trends to real-world classroom strategies, we're breaking it down for you so that you can create a more effective, impactful, and inclusive learning experience. I'm your host, Marissa Bluestone.
And I'm Derek Lampka.
And today, we're digging into the data on metacognition. Chapter 1, about metacognition. When was the last time you stopped to think about how you learn best? How about the way your students assess their own learning progress? What if I told you that there was a strategy that could help your students boost their grades by about a letter grade, but also improve their confidence and help them to retain their knowledge? And that's just the beginning. Today, we'll uncover the new meta in education. And we're not talking about the social media platform. We're talking about metacognition. Stay tuned to the end of the episode to learn how you can implement metacognitive strategies in your classroom, and also how you could be featured on a future episode. So, what is metacognition? In its simplest terms, it's thinking about thinking. Think about the last time you second guessed. Did I lock the front door? You paused, you thought back, you mentally retraced your steps, and maybe even pictured yourself doing it. That's metacognition in action, and it's checking your own thinking. For students, it's their brain's secret weapon. It's like having an internal coach telling them, "You've got this," but more like a helpful coach than a drill sergeant. Throughout their education, metacognition is happening when students stop to ask themselves, "Am I really getting this?" And spoiler alert, a lot of the times they're not even realizing how much they're not getting until they pause to think about it.
You mentioned this as being a key to student success, but doesn't this come naturally to us? Don't we all think about what we think?
Actually, no. Research shows that students aren't naturally metacognitive. They tend to overestimate their understanding. And this may come as a shock, but their study methods aren't always the best. It's the difference between passive techniques, like reading notes they may have taken in class, and the more active ones, like using self-quizzing. It's a skill that often has to be taught, but when it is and when it works, the results are pretty incredible. Chapter 2, the history of metacognition. While officially named in the 1970s, the concept of metacognition has its roots in both philosophical and educational thought. That's right, we're talking about Socrates, the OG of asking deep questions. Socrates was known to ask his students probing questions until they had no choice but to think critically and reflect on their own understanding. Like an ancient debate club, but with fewer trophies and more existential crisis. Fast forward from him and then speed past Aristotle and Descartes to about 50 years ago. Developmental psychologist John Flavel coined the term metacognition and defined it as knowledge of one's own cognitive process. He broke it down into two components, laying the foundation for how we think about it today. Component number one is metacognitive knowledge, which is essentially knowing what you know. For students, it's when they go from faking it to making it, and they somehow become experts on that one thing until the next unit rolls around, and then we're back to square one. Component number two is metacognitive regulation, which is adjusting your strategies to improve your learning outcomes. For a student struggling with a certain topic, it's like their wing it and hope for the best strategy just isn't cutting it anymore. So they switch gears, grab a healthy snack, they put on a focused playlist, and break it down step by step instead. From there, Researchers in the 80s and 90s uncovered how self regulation transforms student outcomes. Think of it as the academic version of a retro comeback.
Okay, but how big of a deal is this really? Sure, metacognition sounds nice, but do we actually have proof it makes a difference?
Oh, we do, and the numbers don't lie. Chapter 3, the data. Metacognition isn't just a buzzword, there's real data behind it. Remember those grade improvements I mentioned? It's 10 percentage points. So let's dig into the data and learn more about how we know this. One of the most compelling studies happened recently. It was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and conducted by Macmillan Learning. Over 1,300 students at historically underserved institutions used metacognitive surveys to reflect on their learning. These surveys are short, and they're given frequently to understand students' experiences, feelings, or understanding of a course or a module within a course. And students who completed 7 or more of these surveys improved their grades. In fact, when students take them, it can bump up their grades by up to 10 percentage points. That can be a full letter grade. So if a student was scraping by with a C, they might be in B territory now, or if they weren't passing, maybe now they are. All because they took a few moments here or there to think about their own learning.
Aha, but this was just one study, wasn't it? How do we know it wasn't a fluke?
Great question. One study doesn't tell the whole story, does it? Well, there's no literal pudding to put the proof in. This wasn't a one off. Studies have consistently shown that students who engage in regular reflection just tend to do better in their classes. And since you literally, in the literal sense, can't see inside a student's head, a lot of what we know came from their self reports. Research using surveys and questionnaires shows that students who actively reflect on their progress and strategies, they report performing better on assessments. But wait, there's more. This is digging into the data after all. And trust me, this next part, it's worth it. From 2019 to 2022, a series of research studies from Macmillan Learning across 115 institutions and more than 7,000 students examined the impact of goal setting and reflection surveys. This study showed some real results. Now, these aren't your typical surveys. They go deeper. They ask students to set goals at the start and then reflect periodically on their progress. By evaluating their own learning strategies, their time management, and their academic performance, they're headed towards achieving the buzziest of buzzwords, a growth mindset.
Wait, so you're saying that filling out a few surveys actually helps students do better in class?
Yes, that's exactly what we're saying. And we have the numbers to back it up. Over the 5 semesters of Institutional Review Board or IRB approved data collection, they learned that students who engaged with at least 3 of these surveys did better academically. In courses where students completed an introductory goal setting survey, plus just 2 checkpoints throughout the semester after their major exams, assignment completion rates increased by 15%. Not only that, students' final grades rose by 8 percentile points compared to students who chose not to engage. Isn't that incredible for just a few moments of self reflection?
Okay, that's cool and all, but one study isn't exactly a game changer.
Fair point, but that's where a good old fashioned meta analysis comes in. A 2008 study synthesized data from 49 studies and found that self regulated learning interventions consistently led to better outcomes across the board. It's not just one study, it's a mountain of evidence. And the benefits don't stop there. These practices don't just give students a quick boost, it helps cement learning for the long haul. Learning happens over time, not all at once. This isn't the matrix where you can stick a cord in the back of your head and just upload whatever it is you need to know. Learning is a journey, it's not a sprint. And it takes your brain some time to consolidate all of that knowledge into your long term memory. Think of metacognitive knowledge like a save game button in a video game. You save it and you can come back to it when you need it. So if you're facing a new challenge and you were in The Legend of Zelda and you already have that boomerang, you can go back and use it again. A classic study found that students who engage in self explanation during problem solving are much more likely to retain information and apply it to new situations. And yes, 30 years ago is practically a classic. And now I'm feeling old. The research showed that when students either talked through or wrote out what they were learning, they were connecting to the ideas more deeply. And this meant it was easier for them to draw on it later in life when they needed it. Research in 2011 showed that students who regularly use metacognitive strategies were better prepared to tackle problem solving across various subjects and real world scenarios. This comes from metacognition's focus on not just getting the content, but getting the how and the why behind the learning.
That sounds lofty and abstract. How exactly would you say that works in the real world, where actual students exist and they do real student things?
Still skeptical, eh? I get it. Well, here's how it can work in practical terms. Say a student has a project that's blending science and history. Say, for example, they were studying the environmental impact of the Industrial Revolution. They can't just list dates and inventions and call it a day. In order to be successful, they have to step back and use their metacognitive knowledge. They might need to ask themselves, what scientific principles explain the pollution from factories? Or how did the pollution affect air quality and water quality over time? And you're not going to get that by just looking up dates. When they use their metacognition, they're making the connections. When they do that, they're analyzing cause and effects. They're thinking across disciplines. They're using their critical thinking skills. Those are all metacognitive moves. One final nugget about the research before I share more about how you can use metacognitive practices pretty simply in your classroom. We know that when students are aware of their learning processes, they tend to feel more empowered and motivated. But how do we know this? I'll tell you. We know because they said so. A study with 173 students took a deep dive into what makes them tick. It explored motivation, self regulated learning, and academic performance. They found that students who understood how they learned showed higher levels of motivation and engagement. Simply put, students who believed they could succeed actually they did better on their tests. They're the little engine that could. The correlation was discovered through student questionnaires in yet another let's look inside the brain moment, along with standardized achievement tests. The takeaway there is students who feel capable tend to perform better. So, when you think about it, who really needs the secret? When the real magic is a little bit of self belief and a little bit more of metacognitive know how. Because when students believe in their ability to succeed, they're more likely to tackle the hard stuff. Research shows that students who track their progress and see even small improvements, they start to feel a greater sense of self efficacy. And that becomes the fuel they need to stick with the challenging material.
Again, real world.
Okay, okay, I got it. Here's an example of how it works. Think of it like going to the gym. The first time you're there and you try lifting weights, it's gonna be a little bit rough. But the more you go, the stronger you get, the more you can lift, and the more you're going to want to go. And then suddenly you're hooked. This is the same, but students are flexing the muscles in their brain and not their biceps. The result is they feel in control, and their motivation to keep learning kicks up yet another notch. After all that research, here's the bottom line. One, metacognition matters. Two, reflection can lead to real academic gains. Three, metacognition is basically a save game button, but for learning. And then finally, four, and this one's the best part, It doesn't take hours, it just takes moments. And those moments of self awareness make a big difference. Chapter 4, What This Means for You. Picture this: your students are studying for a test. Now, some of them have been preparing the entire semester for it. Others are, how do I say it? It's like they're watching an entire Netflix series in one night via cramming. And we all know how that ends. It's a lot of stress and maybe one or two empty pizza boxes. But there's good news. Your students don't have to cram. They don't have to memorize content. And there are super easy ways that you can help them along the way. So by now you might be wondering, well, what can I do to stop the students from cramming? What can I do to stop them from just memorizing the content and actually understanding? And that's where we can help with metacognitive strategies that actually work in the classroom.
Wait. Before you get started, are students actually going to reflect here, or are they going to just zone out and think about their next snack break?
Probably both. But if we're giving students the right tools, they might use their brain power for something other than snack logistics. Tip 1. A great starting point is to have your students reflect before and after major assessments. For example, after a math test, ask them to reflect on which type of problems gave them the most trouble, or what strategy worked best for them. These quick reflections help students recognize patterns in their learning. By taking a moment to assess what they felt confident about and where they struggled, students will start to recognize patterns in their own learning. It can help them to pinpoint what's working, what's not working, and importantly, what they should be doing next. Tip 2 offers another great strategy. Have students set specific achievable goals at the start of the semester or even before a particular unit. So, if students, for example, are taking a public speaking class, that will help them get past the I want to get better at my presentations to more of a I'll practice explaining my key points aloud before my next speech. Whether it's mastering a concept or even improving their critical thinking skills, having goals will help students stay focused. Tip 3. There are tools that can help along the way. You don't have to go it alone. If you're using a digital learning platform like Achieve, you can build these reflections right into your course with features like goal setting and reflection surveys. Research shows they help students improve their grades, and we'll link to more information below. Tip 4 reminds us that self assessment is another important key to metacognition. Have students regularly assess their own understanding by asking some questions. For example, in a biology class, you might ask them, on a scale of 1 to 5, how well do I understand mitosis? And if their answer is 3 or below, you might ask them to write out a specific question they still have. Tools like iClicker could allow you to ask this question even live in class. This not only helps students pause to think about their learning, but it can also give you some real time insights into where they might need more support. And bingo bonus, when students start to see their progress over time, they start to take even more ownership of their own learning. Tip 5 offers us another popular strategy, and that's to get students to explain their learning and their understanding in their own words. Self explanation gets students to dig deeper into what they know, and it helps them to identify any gaps in their understanding. One way to do this is by discussing content that's important to them, or relevant to them, or in line with their goals. I'm thinking about Swiftonomics here, the intersection of Taylor Swift and economics. What's the cost of going to a concert? The real cost, not just the cost of a ticket price. What are you giving up in order to go there? How are you getting there and how much does that cost? And of course, how are you factoring in the price of a t-shirt, which is essentially a must-have? Students can use economic principles to answer that question for themselves, but that's not the only way to do it. You can also have your students write short explanations about a topic or talk about different topics with their peers. One last idea, and this is a bingo bonus. Big assignments can sometimes feel overwhelming for students, but you can help them by breaking it down into smaller and more manageable components. So, say, for example, a research paper or a research project. You might have them first choose a topic, then gather sources, then write a draft, then edit it. Scaffolding. It is not just for construction projects or TikTok hacks. Breaking down big, complex tasks into smaller ones helps students to build confidence, reduce stress, and actually finish their work. And who doesn't love that? We'll link to a blog with more information on metacognitive strategies in the show notes below. Chapter 5, What We've Learned. Metacognition is more than a buzzword. It's a way that students can actually take control of their learning. Research shows that when students reflect on their progress and adjust their strategies, they don't just perform better academically. They build confidence, they build persistence, and problem-solving skills, and those last far beyond the classroom. So, how do we put it all in action? Here's a quick recap of the 5 simple ways to bring metacognition into your classroom. 1. Reflect before and after assessments. So, a quick check-in helps students recognize what's working and what needs adjusting. 2. Set specific goals. Turning vague ambitions into concrete action steps keeps students both focused and motivated. 3. Use digital tools for reflection. Platforms like Achieve and iClicker make self-assessment both easy and effective. 4. Encourage self-assessment. A simple, "How well do I understand this?" scale can reveal gaps in learning. 5. Have students explain concepts. Whether in writing or in discussion, self-explanation can help deepen understanding. Metacognition doesn't have to be complicated. It just takes small, intentional moments. And with new digital tools on the rise, hello AI tutors, the future of self-regulated learning is looking brighter than ever. It's hard to know what's next for students, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't think about it. So today we thought about what our students are thinking about what they're thinking. And if that's not meta, I don't know what is. All jokes aside, is there a way that the digital tools of tomorrow can help students assess their own progress and adjust their strategies? Absolutely. While traditional strategies like self-explanation and reflection are powerful, the future could hold even more exciting possibilities. AI-driven learning platforms can take things even a step further, offering real-time feedback and personalized learning paths for each individual student's needs. And with that, we wrap up today's episode of Digging into the Data. We've journeyed through the world of metacognition, where thinking about thinking isn't just for philosophers, it's for students and educators too. But what do you think? Have metacognitive practices made a difference in your classroom? We're curious and we'd love to hear from you. Hopefully, this episode didn't make you overthink things. Or did it? Either way, mission accomplished. Drop us a voicemail at 512-765-4688, and you could be featured in a future episode. Bonus points if it's the kind of advice that makes us laugh and learn. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Your support means everything. I'm your host, Marissa Bluestone.
And I'm Derek Lamka.
And we'll catch you next time as we dig into the data on AI and AI tutors.